Like people need to be connected to more options for how they access their healthcare. You don't have to just go to the primary care doctor that's associated with whatever insurance. Like you can go and see if there's more people who are more naturopathic or like membership based healthcare where you're not bound to 15-minute appointments, and you can kind of like really get to know your primary care provider. So just understanding that there are more options for you is, I think, it's just critical. We don't have to just do what we've always done.
Hi, Trudy.
Hi.
I'm so excited to have you on Staying Ageless today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, before we get into some of the nitty gritty of what I want to ask you, because I really want your perspective on something, I want to start with you have a very interesting job and work that you do right now. So, can you please explain how you got into what you're doing and why?
Yes. So I am a business coach and diversity, equity, and inclusion coach. And I work mostly these days, I work mostly with other coaches and brands in the personal development industry. But I've been doing this work for a very long time, actually. I say formally started in 2008 because that's when I got my first like consulting job with a national firm. And, I've been doing this work for a really long time, looking at educational inequities in schools and nonprofit organizations, and communities. So this is like my career. Um, and I got into that work because I grew up in an inner city in Connecticut. I'm biracial. My children are identify as Black men. I was a teen mom who dropped out of high school. And so I have come, and over the course of my life, I have come face to face with real systemic barriers, and not just the system barriers, but the people who were like enforcing these systems. And it was just, at so many points in my life, it was just a real fight to like get access to education and, get access to healthcare, and really being confronted with real choices like, do I invest in my education, or do I invest, or do I not do that so that I can appease some kind of like social service agency, or whatever. So
Mm,
I've been like really confronted with that work for a long time. And so the reason that I focus my business, because I run a business doing this work for coaches, for personal development industry folks, and the reason I do that is because I really believe in the power of coaching and like what happens in a high quality coaching environment. And that world is so white. Like the world is so white, and it's really, and it's not just like white people, but it's whiteness is seeped into a lot of the belief systems in that industry. And there's such an opportunity to start to dismantle that so that more Black and brown folks can have access to high quality coaching and get the results in their lives from having that kind of an experience.
I love that, and I'm with you on that because I'm a behavioral coach, and I just completed another coaching certification in addition to the fact that I'm a nutritionist. Because what I do is I have to coach people in order to get results.
Right.
and I agree because I read a lot of books on habit forming and different things, and I never see anyone of color. So it's been cool because lately I've been able to speak on that. But then you realize, oh my goodness, I'm the only one here.
Yeah, it's really wild. It's really wild. When I started looking into the coaching industry coming from the nonprofit world, I hired my first coach, and it was really motivated by business. Like I needed to make more money. I couldn't keep working for people in that environment. Um, and so I hired, a business coach. I started going to those conferences, and I was like, whoa, like this is really like, I can't believe that not only is it so white, but it was almost like that world was insulated from some of the conversations around equity and inclusion that were happening in other industries for years.
Ooh.
How y'all don't know about this? Like, what is happening? Um, so I really wanted to be, part of bringing that conversation into that industry. And, I'm just happy that it has worked out.
That is such a good point. I think that sometimes that when it comes to diversity, and like for me, so I'm thinking about the healthcare industry. I wanted to get your perspective. I feel like it's a huge industry, so it's really hard to just be like, "Child, I want you to tell me about the entire healthcare industry." You know what I mean? It's crazy, but what you just said is super important, which is sometimes it's not even like lack of inclusion. Um, it's sometimes it's lack of inclusion because of literally omission. Like, just we don't even pay attention to you. Like, we don't hear your conversations. We don't know that when you show up at the doctor's office, you have this horrible experience. And or we just and so I don't know if that is always intentional, but it still matters.
Yeah.
And so I don't even know where to begin with the healthcare industry, but I would love to hear your thoughts on like when you're dealing with something like healthcare, like where do you think people could actually start to like have a completely different perspective about the way that things are run from today?
I think that one of the most critical things is that people start to get connected um, to advocates and to other communities, like to other people who are on this journey with them, so that they feel like they're not alone in sharing their experience. Like, I went to the doctor and this happened. Like, if you don't have other people to talk to about what your experience is, it's really easy to start to talk yourself into like, oh, is it because it's me, or is that how they treat everybody? Or, it's really easy to start doing all of that stuff. So being in community with people where you can have those conversations so that you know that you're not alone. And then getting over time, there's this like fluency. I use the word fluency because it I think it is a practice, and over time there's this like comfort that you get with the language of advocacy and being able to advocate for yourself and for other people, and being able to say no, like, you're going to check this thing out, this is wrong, or I want to see another doctor, or send another nurse in here. Like, you have to get there's a comfort level in being able to ask for those things. And also, if you have
Yeah.
the ability and the privilege to do so, like finding other doctors. Like, you don't have to just see who you have. I love that there's so many more. I've been seeing this actually a lot of the name is going to escape me, but direct primary care, like membership based services. I'm seeing more options. Like, people need to be connected to more options for how they access their healthcare. You don't have to just go to the primary care doctor that's associated with whatever insurance. Like, you can go and see if there's more people who are more naturopathic, or like membership based healthcare, where you're not bound to 15-minute appointments, and you can kind of like really get to know your primary care provider. So just understanding that there are more options for you is, I think, it's just critical. We don't have to just do what we've always done. We don't have to like settle for that anymore.
Yeah. No, for sure. And so you help people create equitable organizations that preferably also integrate anti-racist practices, right?
Yep.
One thing you were just saying that was like ding 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 for me was like accountability. Like the problem is like you could have this really great diversity disclaimer and it looks really cute on paper and actually like makes people feel good when they read it. But then in practice, it can fall short. And so I'm wondering, like, does it have to start with the way that we're building the organization from the ground up? Or can we also pivot when we've already built this massive business or organization and now we're trying to get ourselves together and hold ourselves accountable?
I mean, it's always preferable that it starts from the beginning, but people have the businesses they have. Healthcare, for example, it's a huge system. There's a system of healthcare, and then you have individual clinics, right, and individual practices. And so there's responsibility at all of those levels for leaders to be looking at their practices, looking at their policies, like really prioritizing equity in their work. But so if you're already established, you can't just be like, oh well, too bad, like we've been here forever, we can't like we can't go back and start from the beginning. You definitely, I'm optimistic in that, yes, like there is hope, but really where it starts is it's not about the diversity statement on the website, right? It's not about like the one training, it's about a personal transformation that people need to undertake, and those are the kinds of questions that
Mm,
people can be asking of their healthcare providers. Like, what kind of, how have you prioritized, like, how have you made you and your staff aware of issues regarding, healthcare disparities across races or across communities? What personal work have you done to unpack your own biases and how you show up in your practice? Those are questions that can be asked.
ooh, that's good. No, that is really good. And I think those questions, I think an important thing about what you just said is taking control and realizing that I always say your health care provider works for you. We can interview these people. It is actually completely okay to ask them these kinds of questions and be like, I'm not feeling that answer. Let me go find somebody else. It's got to be a little bit more like dating versus like I'm stuck with this person. I'm not being treated well and being upset about it. Um, you mentioned you have this thing on your site where you talk about liberatory leadership, and I was just like, "Ooh, that sounds great." Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, so liberatory leadership, we teach this practice of business called and of coaching called equity centered coaching or equity centered business. And liberatory leadership is one of the components of our framework. And what that really taps into is taking action and making decisions as a leader, whether it's in your business or for yourself or for your home or whatever context of leadership, where you are making decisions that are about creating more space, more opportunity, and are connected to the context of your identity, right? So liberation work is really connected to a person's personal context. So their gender, their race, where they came from, like understanding that our lives, the ways that our lives unfold are can't be separated from the identities that we hold. And so if we're in leadership and we're leading people who are a diverse group of people, we need to understand that people are coming to the table with different personal contexts. And so we need to be understanding of what those things are and then making decisions based on this practice of creating more space for people to show up as they are, to be fully expressed, and to create more opportunity for self-direction, which I think for folks thinking about healthcare, right? Like the idea of self-determination and the ability to choose like what course of treatment you might want or you know, what kind of healthcare practitioner you want to work with, like, and not being told this is what's wrong with you and this is what you need, but that you have personal agency in making
Right.
choices and that you're a collaborator in your health journey. Not just a collaborator, but really a leader.
Mm, mm. So liberatory leadership is, it sounds to me like being authentic to some degree,
Yeah, being authentic and
or it's
being
rooted in authenticity.
it is. It's rooted in authenticity, and it's rooted really in justice. It's rooted in the idea that the world is not just, right? That there is injustice everywhere, and that we need to be creating opportunities to for people to make choices that bring more justice into the world, that put people more in control of their own lives.
Okay. Okay. And how do we prioritize making things equitable?
So equity is really about having people be um, equity is about making sure that people have what they need in order to thrive, which means that not everybody is going to get the same thing, which really, is a mind trip for some people because people grow up thinking like, oh, we're all just the same. It's all about equal. Everybody should be treated the same way. And what we're really asking is that people are treated equitably, which means that if some people need more or if some people need something different, that is what you provide. And so not being afraid
Hmm.
to ask for
That's
something,
so interesting.
if that's what you need, you know what I mean? Like, is part of your own is really connected to your own liberation and your own self-determination to say, "No, that won't work. I know that's what everybody gets. That doesn't work for me because of XYZ. What about this? Like, what about this other thing that would really help me get to the same place?"
Yeah, no, that's so interesting. And when I think about it, when I think about that in the context of healthcare, it gets really complicated because it feels like things are so unequitable right now that
Yeah.
it's almost like we need you to stop and focus on how you were focus on all these disparities and correcting them first before we can have a conversation.
Yeah, I mean, people need to really be able to acknowledge what the inequities are, and that's just hard for people because people take it so personally. They think it's about them. And the
Mm,
fact is that none of us who are alive right now or any of the people who made any decisions about how things are, many of us uphold the policies that have been in place for, a very long time. But we need to be willing to acknowledge, yes, these disparities are real. Yes, there are systemic issues that are connected to all of these things, and we need to take steps to dismantle and repair them. The solutions are equitable solutions, but you can't even get there unless people are willing to say, "Oh yeah, I see how this is like messed up."
yeah. I'm curious what your thoughts are on, like, you help a lot of people create these business environments that are equitable, all that stuff already, right? But what are your thoughts on building something that is that is a solution versus working within a system trying to fix it? Like, do we just give up and just be like, I can't even take it, child?
I think it's both, right? I think that some of us are here to create new things, and I think that some of us are here to, work within, and all of us have our own unique kind of gifts and roles and personalities, and some of us can really bear the weight of creating something new, because creating something new is like, everybody thinks being an entrepreneur is like the greatest thing, but it is great, and
Right.
it's hard. Like, it's like there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of like paving your own way. There's just so much work there. And I mean, and working within a system to try to dismantle and change the system is a different kind of weight, right? And we all can bear certain things. So I think that part of
Mm-hmm.
personal development journey is like understanding where you fit in the world and like what your role is. And so I think we need to be doing both,
I
because
like that. I like that a lot, and it makes sense.
if we create something new, not everybody is going to be like on board with like the new thing. I mean, I imagine that you encounter this, right? Like all the time. I'm sure you teach people how to take more control over their health, over their nutrition, and I'm sure a whole bunch of people are like, "Nah, I'm not messing with none of that. What you're talking about?" You know what I mean? Like, I've been doing things this way forever. This is how I was raised. This is what we eat. This is what we do, right? So not everybody is going to do the new thing. So someone has to
Right.
be working under the old thing.
Well, it's really interesting because no, I hear you. Like, it's really interesting because in my business, it's like the people who find me are people who are interested in alternatives, are people who have sometimes had severely traumatic experiences in offices,
Yeah.
in doctors' offices, or experience, and they're not being heard. No one's getting to the root cause of their problem, but that's a whole other issue with like training and approach to actual healing, which is a whole other thing, right? Because I'm from a holistic, school of thought. So there's just so many layers. So usually when they're coming, their mind is already I'm looking for something. You know what I mean? I'm looking for something that ain't over there.
But how many people never question it? There's so many people who are showing up in those doctor's offices and having these experiences, and they're just kind of like, that's just what I get. Like, that's just what it is.
Yeah. And that I think is the biggest thing that we have to dismantle. Like we have to get rid of this idea that any health professional, including me, is the author of, I should not be able to speak into your life and that be law. Like, I'm sorry. We need to start holding people accountable for what they say, how they say it, fear mongering. When we see this now with the pandemic and stuff, be careful of how we're speaking to people. And I think that that's something that has to do with going back to like the training of health professionals, because like when I was trained as a master's in nutrition and integrative health, we had to study a healing presence. It's a whole thing. Like
Yeah.
you have to show up a certain way to be in communication with a patient. And a lot of times when people are having these horrific experiences, it's clear that that person is not even barely looking at them as a human, but it's
Right.
like, hey, I'm a human with emotions. Like, don't off the cuff say stuff like I may never have a baby ever, or just say some crazy stuff that could stay in my subconscious and not only affect my health, but then affect my my emotions for like the rest of the week, if not years.
And that right there is the essence of liberatory leadership, right? It's about
Mm.
no you as the leader understanding that you're not the expert in someone else's life, but that you're
Ooh.
a guide. You're a guide helping someone on their own journey, but they are in control of their life. You're a leader, they're seeing you as a leader, but you're focused on their liberation and a process of self-determination.
I love that. I love that a lot. What are some questions that we can ask ourselves if we're about this life, and we also want to make sure that our organizations reflected, our businesses? What are some questions we can ask ourselves to start getting our mind right?
Yeah. So one of the things that I always talk to people, because we work with a lot of white folks, but but not all white folks, right? We work with plenty of black and brown folks, Asian
Right.
people from all over the world. And what we often have conversations about is how whiteness and systems of oppression have that how we have been taught those things and how we need to dismantle some of those things too. So looking at the way that we work, the way that we lead, the way we supervise others, the way we create processes in our business, where have we learned those things from? um, do they uphold whiteness? Do they uphold racism? Do they uphold systems of oppression? And how can we start to dismantle those things, not just in the business but also in ourselves? Like what standards are we holding on to that came from somewhere else? You know what I mean? That are not part of actually what we believe in. Are we in alignment with do we show up in our work and in our businesses in alignment with what we believe about ourselves, about others, about what communities should look like, about how people should be in partnership with each other? Do our businesses reflect those things? And oftentimes they don't. Like oftentimes when people really start to look at
Mm.
how they lead, how they manage, how they run meetings, how they create policies, like they start to see that, oh, like I'm holding on to this stuff that I learned in this corporate environment. It's actually not serving me, but that's what I was taught it's supposed to look like.
Wow, that's so interesting. So it's almost like you almost got to do a detox before you can
Completely. It is. It's a
a
big,
mental detox.
and I think that that process really creates more personal freedom once you start questioning, like, wait a minute, I work for myself. Why am I waking up at 7 if I'm not a morning person?
Right.
Start my work day at 8 or 9 o'clock. Like, why am I doing that? Like, I'm the boss. Like, why am I like, is that what I was taught? Like, maybe that doesn't
Yeah.
work for me. Maybe there's another way, and maybe not, right? Like, maybe that is actually the perfect way for you. But if you haven't interrogated it, you haven't looked at all of the ways you do things to say, is this true for me? Like, does this feel right? Does this allow me to be my best self? You know what I mean? And be willing to start to say, like, oh, I'm gonna actually let that go. I'm gonna try to do things a little bit differently.
I love that. I love that. I feel like that's about like being super intentional, like designing what actually works for you, which is something I have to do with my clients anyway, with, health habits and stuff. It's like, child, if you ain't gonna cook every night, go ahead and get a delivery service. Don't feel bad about it. You know what I mean? Do whatever you got to do to support your actual health goals. Don't be out here trying to push yourself into a box.
Right, because you make bad choices, right? Like then you don't get the delivery service because you have an intention to cook every night, and now you're sitting in the drive-through somewhere because you ain't had the time, right? Like I know that story. But we do that.
It's exactly that.
We do that with everything. I promise you. We do that in our businesses. We do that in our like all of our relationships. Like if we're not being intentional and honest and authentic about who we are and what we need, we're operating under this idea of what something should look like, and then when we can't uphold that, like everything falls apart, and then we're like all the way out of alignment.
So good. No, so good. So true. Where can people find you online, Trudy? And also, like, tell us a little bit about some of the entrepreneurial stuff in case anybody listening got a business.
Yes, so people can come and hang out with me on Instagram at Trudi Lebron. And if people are interested in learning more about any of the programs we offer entrepreneurs, they can come and just check out our website. Just at Trudi Lebron, we have a mastermind. We help people like get started. We also help people who are further along in their business. So, yeah, if people want to like learn how to grow their business in a way that is in alignment with like their core values and their beliefs around, about around equity, around how they want to be treated, around designing a business that really creates the impact that you want, come and check us out.
Dope. Thank you so much. This was awesome.
Thank you for having me. This was fun.